Philly mob boss Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo was set to be released from prison right around New Year's Day in 1984. But the feds didn't let him out. Philly-based defense attorney Bobby Simone and Scarfo's son, Nicky Jr., flew down to Texas to see what was the delay. After a few days, Simone sorted everything out, and Scarfo's release was back on schedule for January 20th, 1984. At the hotel where Scarfo and his entourage were celebrating, Scarfo seemed to be in good spirits. At one point, he pulled his right-hand man and nephew, Philip Leonetti, aside and asked about the money he had collected while he was away. That made Scarfo happy. Then he says, "What's going on with Salvi and Chucky?" Leonetti tells him his underboss, Salvatore Chucky Merlino, was not happy that Salvi broke off the engagement with his daughter. Leonetti knew his uncle was spooked about the possibility of Salvi Testa marrying Chucky's daughter. Now with the engagement being broken off, it seems the returning mob boss was even more spooked. Scarfo mumbles, "We gotta keep our antennas up on this one. I don't like this situation." 10 feet away, Chucky Merlino, Salvi Testa, and the rest of those gathered to celebrate Nicky Scarfo's release from prison were having a great time, oblivious to what was going on in Scarfo's head. To the others, this was just a party. But with Nicky Scarfo, nothing was ever what it seemed.
Can't we get, Mr. Scarfo, can't we get some comment about your homecoming? You've been gone 17 months. Sal, you have a comment?
It was a scene fit for a king. News cameras were everywhere. Photographers snapped shots of his every move. Nicodemo Scarfo's long-awaited homecoming at the Philadelphia International Airport caused the level of commotion usually reserved for the arrival of a head of state or an A-list celebrity. And in a lot of ways, it was appropriate. Scarfo had become both. He was the undisputed head of the Philadelphia Atlantic City La Cosa Nostra, and his notoriety had made him one of the nation's foremost celebrity gangsters. Always impeccably dressed and groomed, the 55-year-old Scarfo had become a media sensation, a precursor to the flamboyant John Gotti, who was then still a lowly soldier in New York's Gambino family. As the cameras flashed and the reporters followed his entourage, Little Nicky was carrying himself with swag. Regal flair not typical of someone who had just been released from prison. Flanking Scarfo as he walked from the airport terminal to a fleet of white limousines were his top 2 lieutenants, nephew Philip Leonetti, age 30, and godson Salvatore Testa, age 27. When Scarfo was serving time in prison, Leonetti and Testa worked together to look after his empire with ruthless efficiency, proving their merit as future leaders in La Cosa Nostra and as possible heirs to Scarfo's throne. But therein was a problem. Beneath the surface and all the smiles, backslaps and kisses on the cheek, Scarfo was an evil and vindictive ruler who maintained an unquenchable thirst for blood as a means of both obtaining and keeping power. While Scarfo loved every minute of it, Leonetti was growing tired of it. You know, there was a time in my life when all I wanted was to be with my uncle and to be with La Cosa Nostra and live that life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just like my uncle. It's all I knew. But when Scarfo went away and Leonetti started living his own life, waking up every day and making his own decisions, he started to resent both his uncle and what being in La Cosa Nostra was doing to his life.
I felt like I had no life being in the mob. No identity. To be honest with you, I felt trapped. Once you're in this life, there's only 2 ways out, jail or death. There's no retiring, no quitting. La Cosa Nostra was my uncle's whole life. He lived for this thing. Every day was just like the day before. Where are we getting money? How much are we getting? Who's making moves? Who do we have to watch? Who do we have to kill? That was our routine. Day after fucking day. I'll tell you something about my uncle. If you made a big score, made him a lot of money, the second he was done counting the money, he'd say, "This guy thinks he's a big shot now." All of a sudden, he's JD fucking Rockefeller. Or, "We gotta watch this one, so he doesn't get too big for his britches." The guy just handed you a duffel bag stuffed with 200 grand, and 10 minutes later you're plotting to whack him. As quickly as he would build somebody up, he'd be ready to break them down.
Upon his return to Atlantic City, Scarfo ordered his nephew, Phil Leonetti, to set up a full day of meetings at a local restaurant so that he could get updates on what was going on while he was away. His underboss, Chucky Merlino, and Scarfo defense attorney, Bobby Simone, were top on the list, followed by Capo, Blackie Napoli from Jersey. He was going to meet with everyone separately and wanted an hour or 2 blocked out for each meeting.
Do you want me to bring Salvi down? No. I don't think we need to.
Now this gets Leonetti's antenna up, because the whole time his uncle is in the can, it was mainly Salvi and his guys who were out there shooting it out with the Rickabinis, and Salvi was also heavily involved in the street tax collections. Leonetti found it strange that his uncle was not interested in meeting with Salvi. Bobby Simone had a reputation as the best cross-enclosed criminal lawyer anywhere, and a track record to match. Scarfo went through the litany of criminal charges that everyone in the family was facing, from his underboss Chucky's bribery case to Leonetti's extortion case involving Atlantic City's mayor Michael J. Matthews, and asked Bobby to explain every possible scenario of everyone's individual case. This went on for what felt like hours, at which time Scarfo becomes enraged.
I can't depend on anybody in this entire brigada. Everybody is drunk, stupid, or incompetent. You know, I should go get me 6 black guys from North Philly and start a new gang. They'd be better than what I got right here with these fucks. No, I can't say nothing. But what I'm thinking is, you just came home from jail. You got $3 million sitting in a safe. Everybody you wanted us to kill is dead. And you're still complaining?
Underboss Chucky Merlino then meets with Scarfo to bring him up to speed with everything that's happened while he was away.
Then my uncle looks at Chucky and says, "What about Salvi?" It was like he said it in slow motion, like a movie. I knew at that very moment my uncle had decided that he was going to turn on Salvi. He was making a case for killing him.
Salvatore Salvi Testa was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1956. He was the son of Philip Chicken Man Testa, a member of the Philadelphia crime family who served under Angelo Bruno. Nicodemo Scarfo was his godfather. Testa went to Temple University for 1 year before going into the real estate business. He later became involved with his father's drug trafficking, loan sharking, and extortion rackets.
Things are a lot quieter tonight on Snyder Street in South Philadelphia. Last night at this time and in front of this house, reputed mob boss Angelo Bruno was gunned down. Today, friends and relatives of Bruno paid their respects to his family. Bruno was coming back from dinner.
In March of 1980, longtime family boss Angelo Bruno was murdered, and Testa's father became boss. The death of Bruno triggered a violent civil war in the family between factions loyal to Harry Riccobini and Nicodemo Scarfo, who controlled the family's Atlantic City operations. Testa was inducted as a made man in the Philadelphia branch of Cosa Nostra in June of 1980 in an initiation ceremony conducted by his father Philip and his underboss, Peter Casella.
Filling the shoes of Bruno would be his underboss, Phil Chicken Man Testa. Testa's reign, however, would come to an almost immediate halt less than a year later when he was killed by a bomb that was planted on the porch of his South Philadelphia home, planted on the orders of his very own underboss, Petey Casella, who had reportedly thought with the boss out of the way, he would rise as Testa had to the top.
When Philip Testa died, he left Salvi an $800,000 estate, which included a dilapidated bar in New Jersey, 2500 Boardwalk, Ducktown, right on the sites where Donald Trump wanted to build Trump Plaza in Atlantic City. In 1984, Trump allegedly paid Salvi Testa $1.1 million for the right to tear down the bar. This was twice the market value. Because of his father, Salvi knew the ins and outs of the business. They had maintained a close relationship, and Salvi became involved with him in the rackets, including drug trafficking, loan sharking, and extortion. Reporter and author George Anastasia once wrote, "Salvi Testa loved it all. The stalkings, the murders, even the Enrico Riccobini suicide. He was the South Philadelphia equivalent of a mainline blue blood. He was born to be a wise guy." Former mobster turned informant Nicholas "Nick the Crow" Caramondi once stated,
Salvi was all for this thing. Knew it inside and out. Knew it better than guys who were 60 years old and in the game for 40 years. Because of his father, you know. He'd been a good teacher. Salvi had nerve and he didn't care who he killed. Sometimes we'd go out on a hit and we'd come back and tell him, listen, there were kids in the car. Or the guy's entire family was in the car. I don't give a fuck who was in the car, he'd say. Everybody goes. That's the kind of guy he was, Salvi. One Thanksgiving, he wanted us to go to Sonny Riccobini's house, where Robert Riccobini was having dinner with his family. Shoot everybody in the fucking house. But he and Charlie Ianich and Faffy made up some story that he didn't show up, just to appease Salvi. We didn't go for killing kids, you know? That's where we drew the line. But Testa? He was just so full of venom he didn't give a fuck. He was a guy made for this thing. He loved it. He lived it.
As we continue our series on disorganized crime, we explore the reign of Nicodemus Scarfo tonight, who in 1981 was named Don of Atlantic City. Scarfo lived a lavish lifestyle, no wonder. According to Underboss Philip Leonetti's testimony after he turned informant, Local 54 President Frank Gerace, skimming off the union's welfare plan, paid Scarfo $20,000 a month. A number of bars and restaurants protected by Scarfo from Local 54 paid him $500 a week, and Scarfo ate for free at Scanicchio's. Jerry Blavitt of Memories even paid the mortgage on Scarfo's boat. Although little Nicky was not a big gambler, he was comped like a high roller at many of the casinos, generally enjoying the good life of a man with power. The theory of Scarfo's succession to power was that he allowed the New York families to operate here also, as long as he was deemed Don of the resort. The man many had dismissed as a two-bit punk had transformed into a masterful mafioso. Fellow mobsters flocked to the resort to pay their respects and live the high life with Scarfo.
Salvi was just 25 years old at the time of his father's murder. He was enraged and bitter about the way his father was killed. He vowed to hunt down his father's killers and avenge his death. Philip Testa's murder was allegedly ordered by his underboss, Peter Casella, and Capo, Frank Narducci Sr. January 7th, 1982. 50-year-old Frank Chicky Narducci Sr., a longtime capo under Angelo Bruno, was murdered by Salvi Testa and Testa's crew. On March 15, 1982, Testa killed mob associate Rocco Marinucci. He was allegedly the one who had detonated the bomb that killed Salvi's father. Marinucci's body was found in a parking lot in Southwark, Philadelphia, with several bullet wounds and a mouth full of cherry bombs. Pete Casella, the third person involved in Philip Testa's killing, was banished from the mob and fled to Florida. In July of 1982, Salvi is wounded in an attempt on his life while sitting outside Lorenzo's Pizza in the Italian markets in Philadelphia. 2 Riccobini soldiers were arrested following the shooting. Soon after, they became government witnesses. Only days out of jail, Nicodemus Scarfo was already plotting his next kill. And this time, instead of Salvi Testa doing the killing, he would be the one getting killed. Prior to this, Philip Leonetti had been Nicky Scarfo's prized pupil and had never seriously questioned his uncle's leadership. He was, in many respects, the perfect soldier, the perfect protégé. But by putting out a hit on Salvi Testa, Scarfo had gone too far even for Crazy Phil. Nicky Scarfo's increasingly erratic behavior had shaken Philip's faith in his uncle and his blind allegiance to La Cosa Nostra to the core.
My uncle went crazy with the power when he became boss. It was like he became drunk off of it. He became so full of jealousy and hatred that he had turned into something out of a horror movie. This wasn't a thing of honor or respect. It wasn't even about the money. It was all about the power. Bodies were falling everywhere. He wanted to murder everybody and everything around him. It wasn't enough for us to kill our enemies. We were now going to start killing our friends. He'd say, the only way to hold on to power is to kill anybody who stands in your way. That's the kind of mentality he had on everything. He was just looking for excuses to clip guys. The more power he got, the crazier and more paranoid he became. He'd get angry and tell a whole group of guys, "Don't you fucking test me. 'Cause I'll bring in a squad of guys from New York and wipe everybody in the room right off the fucking map. I won't leave none of you standing." He's talking about killing our whole fucking family. And these guys knew he'd do it. And guess what? He would have. I didn't understand it. Before, we were only killing bad people. Now, we're killing everybody. Now we're talking about killing Salvi? He was one of us. He loved my uncle. He believed in this thing, La Cosa Nostra. He killed for it. Almost died for it. Salvi looked up to my uncle as almost a second father. Right before Salvi's father, Philip Testa, died, we were having dinner and he turned to my uncle. I'll never forget it. He said, "Nick, if God forbid something were to happen to me, please be sure and always take care of Salvi." And my uncle says, God forbid that would happen. I would treat him as one of my own. That kept replaying over and over in my head when he said that he would treat Salvi as one of his own. And now here he is, plotting to have him killed. Who's gonna get wet next, huh? Me?
Several factors contributed to the animosity that Nicky Scarfo felt towards Salvi Testa in those early months of 1984. Salvi had ruffled Scarfo's feathers when he became engaged to Chucky Merlino's daughter. Despite the fact that both Testa and Merlino were like family to him, the increasingly paranoid mob dictator saw it as a power play by either Testa or Merlino, or perhaps both. Salvi Testa's stock had been on the rise in the underworld since he personally avenged the death of his father by murdering the men responsible in such sensational fashion. Testa was, in many ways, like a younger version of Scarfo himself. He had developed a loyal crew of killers with the young executioners, and he enjoyed an almost rabid rock star type following among many in the Philly underworld. Law enforcement officials who observed Salvi Testa's activities described Testa as a high-profile mob capo or captain, a cocky wise guy with a volatile temper and a penchant for bragging. They said he wore open-collar shirts, leather jackets, and lots of gold jewelry. He rode around in a late-model Cadillac, surrounded by bodyguards, and had a 34-foot cabin cruiser anchored in Ventnor, New Jersey. Yet, unlike other organized crime figures, Testa had no nickname, a clean police record, and didn't have front occupation. He hung around a variety store at 9th and Christian Streets, and he played tennis. He had once bragged that he had scared the nephew of a rival mob figure into committing suicide. Lazzari, the crime commission investigator, said Testa boasted after the suicide.
I don't gotta hit anybody. I just have to tell them I want to talk to them, and they'll do the job for me. He had some connections because of his father. He had a bit of a leadership instinct in him. He didn't fear anybody. He was a fearless guy. I think he got more macho after his old man was blown away.
The tipping point in Scarfo's betrayal of Salvi Testa came in April of '84 after an article in the Wall Street Journal, which referred to the ruggedly handsome and charismatic Testa as the fastest rising mobster in the United States. Soon after this, Testa was shunned by Scarfo at a charity dinner and was apparently instructed to sit separately from Scarfo and his top men. Testa was also omitted from a trip to Puerto Rico. Nick Caramondi said,
Salvi was very cautious. He just felt bad vibes. Every time you shook his hand, he'd bring you in close with his right hand and just pat you down with his left hand from behind to see if you were strapped. He was the kind of guy who, if he knew for sure, would have sought retribution from Merlino or Scarfo and tried to kill them. This kid, he would have gone down in a blaze of glory. But he wasn't sure. He was aware. He was alert. He just wasn't sure.
Salvi became engaged to Underboss Chucky Merlino's daughter, Maria, and the wedding was set to go ahead in April of 1984. For various reasons, Salvi canceled the wedding 2 months before they were due to marry, by which time almost all of the arrangements had been made. It's said that hundreds of guests had already been invited. When Testa got cold feet and broke off the engagement, Scarfo saw an opportunity to manipulate the situation and turn his inner circle, and ultimately the rest of the family, against Testa for disrespecting the daughter of the underboss.
Both Chucky and Salvi loved my uncle. They were both loyal. They never would have gone against him. But he had it in his head that Salvi marrying Chucky's daughter meant that they were teaming up to eventually challenge him. What a lot of people didn't know was that right before Salvi broke off the engagement, he spoke to my uncle on the phone when he was in prison and basically asked my uncle for permission to end it with Chucky's daughter. Salvi was trying to do the right thing. He wasn't trying to disrespect Chucky or his daughter. They were both young. It didn't work out, that's all it was. Now my uncle's telling him from jail, you don't gotta marry her. You should do what you want. Spread yourself around. Don't worry. When I come home, I'll talk to Chucky. He'll understand. At the same time, he's in Chucky's ear telling him that what Salvi was doing had dishonored his daughter and was a slap in his face, and that he shouldn't stand for that kind of disrespect to his daughter and his family. My uncle started to say things about Salvi like, this kid is getting to be too big for his britches. Or this kid's acting like he wants to be the boss. We'll see about that. Or he'd say, this kid is full of treason. Or this kid's fooling with drugs. Or these ciggies are always up to something. I remember that whole summer. Salvi was on edge. He knew something was up, he just didn't know what it was. And here I am, one of his best friends. And there was nothing I could do to help him. I wish I could have saved him, but I couldn't.
By the summer of 1984, Nicky Scarfo's plan had worked. Not only was Chucky Merlino backing his play, he was supervising the plot. At one point, Nicky the Crow Caramondi and Charlie White had the contract, but they couldn't get it done. Then Fafi and Tommy Del Giorno had it, they couldn't get it done either. Salvie's antenna was up, and even though he was a lot younger than all of those guys, he knew the streets 100 times better. He was not going to be an easy mark. Killing the leader of the young executioner's crew would not be easy. Attempted hits were set up to kill Testa at various locations, including a South Philadelphia health club where he worked out, a beauty salon he owned, mobster Faffy Inarella's house where a baby shower had been scheduled, a mob gathering at Tommy Del Giorno's condominium on the Ocean City boardwalk, aboard Salvie's own boat, which was docked in Ventnor, and an exit ramp in Northfield coming off the Garden State Parkway. But all of the plans failed. The setting of the next plot to kill Salvi showed just how far the Scarfo mob had deteriorated.
Joe Punch was Salvi's best friend. Joe Punch had a brother, Anthony, who was with us. They were part of Salvi's crew. Their father, Old Man Punjatori, who we called the Blonde Babe, was a made guy and had been around since Ange was boss. The Blonde Babe's sister died, Joe Punch's aunt. The whole family was going to the wake, which was in South Philly, to pay their respects. Nobody ever missed a wake. Chucky had gotten involved in the planning of Salvi's murder. He decided he wanted to clip him at the wake, right there in the funeral parlor. He wanted Tori Scafidi, who hung around his son Joey, to pull the trigger. We're gonna shoot a guy inside a funeral parlor during a wake for an old lady. Are you fucking kidding me? That's honorable?
The night before the funeral, Tori gets into a fight at a bar. He gets pinched. When Scarfo finds out, he goes nuts.
These fucking kids. You can't count on them for shit! Motherfucker! Chucky assigns the killing to Charles Charlie White Each. He tells Charlie to bring a .38 to the parlor. He does. The plan was to whack Salvi inside the bar area. This funeral parlor had a little lounge. There was a small bar that was separate from the room where the body was. But when we were there, the place was packed. You couldn't move. Because of this, and heavy police presence in front of the church, Scarfo calls off the hit.
Scarfo decided it was time to ante up. He called for another meeting with Tommy Del Giorno to discuss a revised plan to murder Salvi Testa.
My uncle tells Tommy, give the order to Joe Punch. Now, Joe Punch was Salvi's best friend. He was his right-hand man. They were together every day since they were kids. The whole time this is going on, nobody in Salvi's crew, the young executioners, knew we were going to clip him. They knew there was some kind of tension, you know, a little static, but no one knew exactly what was going down. A few days later, Tommy comes back and says to my uncle, Joe Punch says he'll do it, but he doesn't want to pull the trigger. My uncle laughs and says, what's the fucking difference?
The plot to murder Salvi Testa had become more sinister by enlisting Joseph Joe Punch Punjatori, Testa's best friend, to lure him into what was to be a death trap.
Joe Punch knows the rules. If he tells Salvi, or drags his feet, or fucks up the hit, my uncle will kill him. Kill his brother, kill his father, because they're all connected to the Cosa Nostra.
Punjatori enlists 2 other members of the young executioner's crew to carry out the killing of their friend and leader. Joe Punch brought Salvatore Wayne Grande and Joey Grande in on the plot. He then set up a meeting at a candy store on Passyunk Avenue in South Philly. Salvi arrived at the now-gone candy shop and greeted Salvatore Grande before retreating to the back of the store to talk to Punjatori. At which time, Grande pulls a silenced pistol from under the cushions and shoots Testa in the back of the head. Grande then stands up, shoots him again, killing him. At 10:23 p.m. the following day, on September 15th, 1984. Authorities find the body of the fastest rising mobster in the United States, hog-tied and wrapped in a blanket in a ditch off of Sicklerville Road in Camden County, about 50 yards from the Atlantic City Expressway.
Salvi used to tell people he was going to live high and hard because he was certain he wasn't going to go natural.